lots of trial and error as I've gone as well. I just turned 50 years old, which just happened. Just turned 50 years old exactly a month ago. And through this whole pathway, things show up where suddenly you're put into a place where you're not in your comfort zone. And this actually happened to me exactly 15 years ago. It was the very, very first time I was ever asked to give a talk. It was actually the same year that I came up with Wealth Dynamics. Hands up, who's taken the Wealth Dynamics test? Okay, so it was exactly, and in fact, for the first 5 years, we didn't have a test online. It was all just done manually. And so I came up with the algorithms for it. I figured the whole thing out. It happened while I was sitting on a beach in Singapore. My kids were there. I was mentoring different entrepreneurs already. And before mentoring was really a thing, before social entrepreneurship was really a thing. And as I was kind of going through it, I was like, why am I telling different people to do different things? Because they're naturally different. There must be some kind of a pattern here. And I studied a lot of psychometric testing. I understood all about Carl Jung and his history. And so as a result, I was sitting there on the beach, came up to Wealth Dynamics Square, started sharing that with some of the people I knew. And they go, Roger, you need to tell more people about this. And one of them, he says, I'm going to get a group of people together. You're going to get you on stage. You're going to have to speak to them. So this is like 2012. I was like really nervous. Like, well, I'm going to get on stage and there's going to be like 50 people I need to speak to. So what I do whenever I am out of my depth, whenever I am trying to learn how to do something, as I go and find the best I can find in the world and learn from them. And so what I do is I phone up the person that I thought was the best person at public speaking. His name's Scott Friedman. He was based in Colorado. Scott was at the time the head of the National Speakers Association. So he did all the tips and tricks on speaking. So I'm phoning him up and said, Scott, hello. And I'd taken him on a tour once because I used to be a promoter in Singapore. I took him on a tour of Southeast Asia. And so he knew me. And he's like, hey, Roger, good to hear from you. And I go, yeah, well, I've got a bit of a problem. He goes, what is it? I said, well, I'm going to be giving my first talk. He goes, congratulations. I go, no, I'm really scared about this. I don't know what I'm going to say or how I'm going to say it. Can you give me any tips? And so he's here, I'm in Singapore, he's in Colorado, end of the phone. He goes, Roger, a tip I sometimes give speakers is if a speaker has a strange accent, the first thing they should do before they do anything else is to explain their accent. Because if they don't, no one's listening to anything they're saying because they're still thinking about their accent. So I'll start by telling you why I have a strange accent. It's because my mother is from China, and my father is from Scotland. And of course, if you have a Chinese mother and you have a Scottish father, that would make you confused. So I've gone through my whole life with this accidental word, which I'm going to put up here. You've all got some place to write something to take notes on, so whenever I'm writing things on the board, I highly recommend you write them down as well, plus other things as well, because often you'll hear things in the morning which become relevant in the afternoon and so on. But this word here, super important word, which is where we always start our summits with, is the word perspective. Because perspective happens when you are somewhere you're not. Like, so for example, if you go on holiday, right, then you get perspective on your business. Like, why am I even doing it that way? Or if you go and meet someone who's running a business and you're in a job, you're like, well, why wouldn't I just go do that, right? Or it's not just about place. So this happens to me, like, because I've got this strange accent and because I travel around the world, and people are always like, where is that accent from? Where are you from? Like, no one ever thinks I'm from wherever I am, ever, anywhere, right? I go to Asia and people think I'm from Europe, right? I go to Europe, people think I'm from America. I go to America, people think I'm from South Africa. Wherever I go, people think I'm from America. So as a result of that, I spend my whole time with this, which is I'm looking at things from a place where I'm not. And when you do that, interesting things start to happen. In fact, the most fundamental thing for most of us is we're too close to our own business, we're too close to our own job, our own life. And sometimes perspective is not just taking yourself out of place, it's taking yourself out of time. Like to actually invest a weekend of your life here, when there's so many other things you could be doing, to get perspective on where you're at, that makes a huge difference. Especially when you get to 18 years old. Hands up, who has kids? Who has kids? Hands up, who's not sure? No. Okay, so if you have kids and they become teenagers, think about it when they get to like 18. Is there something that changes? Everyone here has at some point turned 18. So if you turn 18, what changes? Take a moment with the person next to you and just share with that person what are the fundamental things that change in our society when someone turns 18. Take a moment with the person next to you. Come up with one thing. for sharing. Okay. We'll check with you. Can I ask the team? There's been a question: do we have a Wi-Fi code? Is there a Wi-Fi code in the room? Football. You go to the thing where the guest ID at the bottom, and then apparently it's football. Yeah. Okay. Good to know. Right. So that's good. Oh, perspective. Halftime at football, right? That's like how many times do you see a team go in at halftime, losing the game, come out, and then the next half they win the game, right? So there's always this thing about like taking that moment. 18 years old. So what happens to someone at 18? Volunteer answers. Who would like to share? Yeah, go ahead. You become an adult, right? So what does it mean to become an adult? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Work. Yeah, thrown out of the house. Yeah. It depends. Oh, access. Okay, so now you can drink alcohol legally. Yeah. You don't get free travel anymore. If you do something bad, is there different consequences? Yeah, you're legally culpable. You're at the point where you should know better. Right? So on one hand, you get new freedoms, which is like, this is awesome. The other hand, there's major consequences. Was there anything else you'd like to add? You don't have any wisdom. Oh, you think you know it all. You think you're smarter than your parents. You think you know it all. Which means you've got to be pretty careful. You actually got to show a level of humility, which sometimes it takes a few more years to figure out, right? Isn't this true? So why am I saying all of this stuff when we're saying getting perspective? Because we've been doing this summit. It was called Fast Forward Your Business, and then it was called Fast Forward Summit, and now it's being called the Global Entrepreneur Summit, largely because there's so many more entrepreneurs now sharing their stories, whereas at the beginning we were talking very much about the forward trends. Now we've got people living into those trends as well. We've been doing this for 7 years, but this year's different. Why? Because it isn't just that a child somewhere has turned 18. We've all turned 18. It's the year 2018. This is the year that the 21st century has become an adult. This is the year we don't have excuses anymore. We can't say, oh, well, it's all new and it's all brand new, we really don't know. So yes, we're kind of like ruining the environment, and yes, like, the whole healthcare is a challenge, and yes, we basically are still not solving things like poverty, but one day we'll figure it out. It's like, oh, we've actually now got to a point where we have greater freedom than ever before, but there's now greater consequences than ever before as well, and we can't now say we didn't know better, because we're 18 years old. So as an entire generation, we're at a point where this year becomes a critical year, where this entire, not just century, but millennium, has turned 18 years old. So keep that in mind as we're going through today. Like, what is it that actually we should all know better at this point? What is it we could be doing differently? And where does humility play a point where we actually think we know it all, when in fact maybe the most important thing that happen in the next 2 days is to unlearn some of the things that you've learned to learn better again. I often do this at the beginning point to just really make sure we're all awake and aware. I want you to imagine for a moment, it's possible, maybe, that there is someone in the world right now today who already is getting 10 times the results that you're getting in your life, right? So whatever you're looking to achieve, they're not just getting 10% or 20% more than you, they're getting 10 times more than you. And that's 10 times the income that you've got today. Like your paycheck at the end of this month, they've got 10 times more than that already. And they're getting 10 times the impact, which means they're actually going out and making a bigger difference in the world as well. And they've also got 10 times more fulfillment in their life. This is like, is that possible that someone out there is actually doing this right now? And not only that, but that person is not just not as smart as you. They're not as hardworking as you, right? They're not even as old as you. In fact, some of them are a lot younger than you. Hands up who thinks that's possible, that someone like that exists in the world today? Yeah, there are probably many of them. And so the whole thing is, well, what do they do different, which is allowing that to happen? There's a good chance that the things that you think at the moment are the reasons that it's too difficult to actually change, they didn't think those things were too difficult, or they weren't even aware those things were things. And as a result of that, they ended up basically living a very, very different life and having a different impact as well. Sometimes we need to start with the beginner's mind, which means I'm learning to learn again. And that's what perspective is about. So for the first 30 minutes of this morning, it's not really about here's some content or here's some ideas. It's about what do we need to empty out of our mind, which actually then opens us up to something far, far greater. Has who in the room believes that you currently are operating at a tiny fraction of your full potential? Who believes that? Yeah. So the person that you got to bring into this room today is not the person you were waking up as yesterday. It's the person you're going to be being 10 years from now, who you're going to start being now. Right? So like, what does it take to be that person? And what is that big dream? Right? What is it you're going to achieve, because those are the dreams we're going to be pulling out from this room over the next 2 days. We're going to hear stories from many people here, so it's great to see many familiar faces, who have actually been just living a very, very different, unencumbered life where you're actually truly in your flow in the things that you're meant to be doing. And I'm going to start with just a little bit of a time scale, right? First question I'm going to ask you, very easy, simple question. You can reflect on this for a moment, which is, what were you doing not yesterday or last week, but what were you doing exactly 1 month ago, right? So 1 month ago, it was the beginning of August, first week of August. You think, remember what you're doing? Were you on holiday? Were you working on the same business? Were you trying something new out? What were you up to? What were you doing? The reason I'm asking that question is I want to share with you just a bit of history, how this is a very unique event, and the things that I'm adding into this event is really a one-time only because of what I've been doing over the last week and month. So 1 month ago, I know where I was, so I've got a photo to show it. Here I am, with my mother and father. Photographic proof, I have a Chinese mother and a Scottish father. This is how we dress at home. so I was in Japan, and we all went on this journey to China, to Japan. We had about 60 of us who were on that journey. It was called the I Ching Adventure. 12 days, 12 signs of the zodiac. Had my birthday at the end on the 7th of August, and was lucky enough to have an actual samurai outfit loaned to me by a 4th generation samurai. So that was his outfit, which happened to fit me, and we had everyone show up for my party. This was in the have you seen Kill Bill? This was in the Kill Bill restaurant. We were lucky enough to actually rent out the entire restaurant and actually have our experience there. These were the 60 people that all came along, who all dressed for the occasion. And while on the one hand we're having a lot of fun, I learned how to be a ninja, learned how to be a samurai, we're having a lot of fun, we also had some pretty surprising moments as well. So this was one moment, I was sharing this with those who came yesterday, where we went to a bonsai tree garden. It was actually called a bonsai tree museum, but it was actually privately owned by a ramen multi-millionaire who made his money from ramen noodles, and then he had gone out and bought all of these bonsai trees, which were anywhere from $500,000 to a couple of $1 million for the bonsai trees, and some of them were like 1,000 years old. And we were going through the whole process of learning how to truly drink tea the way it's meant to be drunk in a tea ceremony, right? And this was using the same, it's called the Bushido, which is the samurai code. It's the same samurai code of true presence that the samurais use when they're actually out as a warrior, as they do when they're actually drinking tea. So we're learning this, and at the same time, looking at bonsai trees and just realizing this tree's going to outlive all of us. We actually had the guy there who was the entrepreneur, who had gone out and made all his money, who was there spending 12, 15 hours every day working on these bonsai trees, just pruning the trees. And someone in our group asked him, why do you do that? Why do you spend 12, 15 hours a day, like you're retired, you don't have to do this. Why do you spend all this time on this tree? And he said, well, this tree's been around for 500, 600 years. Every 100 years is another 3 generations. So 600 years is 20 generations. And so it's 20 generations of people before me who looked after this tree, before I got the tree to look after. And it's going to be another 60, 70 generations after me who are also going to be looking after this tree. So if I don't look after this tree, I don't just let down everyone who came before me, I let down everyone who comes after me as well. Now this is one of the most fundamental things which defines the difference of someone who truly gets their success because they're worthy of it, and someone who doesn't. And it's the difference of an opportunity, which is when you have something which kind of sounds like a good idea, like I'm going to start this business, right? It's a good opportunity to do this. Or I'm going to go and find that customer, and that's going to be a good opportunity to have a new customer. This is a maybe, where it's like, oh, that would be good, but if it doesn't happen this week, that's no sweat. It's like, I'll do it next week. There's no actual urgency to do it. It's just kind of like it's something that's going to happen at some point. So we put off our dreams because it's an opportunity, but that's all it is. Compared to what he was saying was, no, this is not just something I might do, right? Because I'm going to let so many people, there's a cost. There's a cost if I don't do this. This is an obligation. So the difference of an opportunity and obligation is the difference of a maybe and a must. I must look after that tree every day because of the sense of legacy that I have, because so many people will be let down if I don't actually do what I'm meant to do. So over the next couple of days, for some of you, you may actually not change what you're doing. You just end up creating a bigger flower pot to actually grow in. You end up making it a must, and then it suddenly starts to happen happen in ways it wasn't happening before. And it's because of the cost of who you're going to let down by actually not doing it. And that doesn't just include your children, it doesn't just include your customers, it includes those people you'd be impacting otherwise as well. So we heard that, and at the same time, there was an element of this concept of time and legacy linked in with this immediacy. And the immediacy came when we were each given one of these scrolls. So this scroll here is 2 Japanese characters. These characters are pronounced Ichigo Ichi. And Ichigo Ichi, as it's written up here, means treasure every meeting, for it will never occur again. It was a really interesting energy because we were sitting there chatting away and having a bit of tea. And as the tea master, as she was sitting there pouring the tea, she said, Ichigo Ichi. She said, treasure every meeting, for it will never happen again. Me sitting here right now pouring tea for you will never happen again. This tea will never be poured again. Me speaking to you at this moment will never happen again. We may never meet again. This is such a sacred moment. Be in this moment. And there's a really powerful thought when you start from that place, that you are sitting next to people you will never sit next to again. You're hearing me in a way you'll never hear me again. I'm meeting you in a way that we will never meet again. There will never be another moment like this. We're in a historic moment right now. And for so many of us, we just have all these moments pass by. We're living in a technological world of distraction, which means it's so easy to stop being present. True entrepreneurship is when you can get the microscope out and be at that level of presence. And you can get the telescope out and you can get that level of legacy. So we want to actually 10 times, 100 times out your view of your position in this world, and then 10 times, 100 times out that value of that position as well. That's what the next 2 days is going to be about. We're going to see how we do that as we walk through this as well. I actually, last week, went to the ultimate place of immediacy, which was Burning Man. So I was at, but here's myself and my 3 kids. There's Kathleen, who's now 23 years old. There is Teresa, who's 21, just turned 21 2 days ago. Oops. Someone crazy. And there is also Luke, who is now 19 years old. I think this is my clicker. It's going crazy. I need to take it out for now. All right, so Burning Man is a place where 70,000 people show up in the middle of the desert. They spend all year building incredible art, and within 1 week, all the art has disappeared, it's all burnt down, everything's disappeared, and you leave no trace and so on. And so that whole thought of like, what is valuable enough that you're going to do it, and put all that time into doing it for the experience alone, knowing it's all going to disappear again, and that power of doing that as well. The moment we start thinking in that way, that everything is interlinked and we all are part of a larger experience, and the more we start thinking in that way as well, we go, well, then we're going to make the most of that moment, which is why Burning Man works so amazingly. That when you're there, everyone is so present, everyone knows just how lucky they are to be at that one moment. It will never happen again. And in exactly the same way, over these next 2 days, the more present you are, the more you're aware that that conversation you're having when you're getting your coffee, that person you're sitting next to at lunchtime, that person could be your next partner or your next investor or your next customer. And it's simply a matter of opening up that curiosity as to who they are, and at the same time, how you can be of service to them as well. So there's just a couple of different pointers in terms of how we can start this session to really make sure we're going to make the most of it. So can I see a show of hands of who here is willing to commit to making the most of the next 2 days to ensure you are getting the most and those around you are getting the most as well? Okay, so this is our opportunity. We're going to kick it off right now with a bit more of an imagination, not what you were doing 1 month ago, but what you were doing 30 years ago. So 30 years ago was a year, 1988. So where were you in 1988? What was your job? What was your business? Were you living? If you can't remember, take your age, minus 30. How old were you 30 years ago? If you're not 30, then you can experience yourself in this exercise. Take a moment, share with the person next to you. Where were you 30 years ago?
helping a little bit today and welcoming so many people here today. Duncan Butcher, Duncan Buchanan, Nyambura Lydia, Cosmas, Maina, Teddy Ayo, Kim Tali, Kirui, Ali, Douglas, all of you bringing new life here today. And Peter Karasha, Massimo, Bola.
So you can either volunteer yourself, you can volunteer someone you just spoke to because you thought that has something interesting to say. So it was something quite different 30 years ago, I'd like to share. We have a gentleman with his hand up right over here. So we've got a microphone coming. Your name is Abdul. All right, it is Abdul. Can we give Abdul a round of applause?
I'm going to share Armel's experience.
Oh, wow, okay.
I was surprised that she was even born, but there you go. Armel was 17 years old 30 years ago, and what she said was that she remembers thinking, why are people so divided? Why are walls between people? And I thought that's amazing to have such a perspective at such a young age. So she expanded on it, and she said, oh, it's probably because, was it 13 years old maybe? She lost her father when she was 13, and I said, well, I can relate to that because I lost my dad when I was 20. And it is like a brick wall hitting you.
Sure.
And then you looking at, oh my God, there's this wider world out there. And another thing she said was that she had this perspective because at your father's funeral, he had so many people there that you didn't recognize. So she wanted to just, explore why so many people knew your father, honored him, at his funeral. So that was her at 17.
That's amazing. Well, let's give a round of applause for Were you in a job at that point? Were you still at school?
No, I was still at school.
You were still at school?
Yeah.
Did you know what you wanted to do at that point?
I wanted to help people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What are you doing today?
I'm a coach.
You're a coach? When did you begin your coaching career? Was it straight after school, or did you do some jobs?
No, my mother didn't want me to study psychology, so I went into international business.
Wow, okay. So you did international business. What do you coach on today?
I'm coaching on authentic leadership.
Authentic leadership. So you kind of like does the international business help you with the authentic leadership or not really?
No, it helps me with entrepreneur because I'm helping entrepreneurs to be authentic in their purpose, following their purpose and doing their work with their purpose.
Yeah. So Steve Jobs says that you can always connect the dots, but only backwards, right? It's only backwards you can see, oh, this is why I did all these things, even though some of them is like, why don't you do that? It's like, I'm not the one who do that. But that's where it gets really interesting, is that where we are today, and by the way, it sounds to me like you're doing something which actually links to when you were 17 wanting to help people, right? So you're actually doing that right now.
Completely.
Yeah, absolutely. So sometimes that kind of like what we wanted to do earlier shows up as well. But for some of us, it's a whole different story, right? As we're going to see as well. But thank you very much. Can we give a round of applause again? So this is it Mariana? Can we give Mariana a round of applause? From this morning already?
From the day before yesterday.
Oh, that was from the yesterday session.
And today.
Okay, awesome.
Yes, I'm a good learner.
He's good. He's good. I like it. Yeah.
So, when I was 14, I was in the hospital, because this lady doesn't want to share, and I didn't have a chance to listen. So, I was in the hospital, I had my appendix taken out.
You didn't have a chance to listen. You meant you were talking all the time.
So, when I was 14, I was in the hospital.
Okay.
And all my school friends, they came in, I was in pain, and they all came in and made me laugh. And until you mentioned this time, I didn't remember this particular moment, but because you mentioned 30 years ago, and I realized even though I was in pain, laughter had made me forget about the pain, plus the friendship. So I'm trying to make people happy now, connecting the dots backwards.
All right, so you're a comedian today?
I'm going to.
What do you do today?
I try to make people happy through humor, and I'm really interested why.
Does that mean how do you do that?
So happy is the health, attitude, powerful positioning, parents and younger generation. So I devise my own 5 steps to happiness.
Okay, so you got 5 steps to happiness?
5 steps to happiness.
Okay, all right, got it. So that's what you're doing right now?
That's what I'm doing
Yeah.
right now. But I'm also very interested how interesting for women to be women in this particular
Yes.
2018.
Mhm.
It's a completely different dynamics. So that's my second interest. I
Sure.
created Moms the Heroes. I think every
Yeah.
mom is a hero.
So there's an element of passion, there's an element of purpose that's showing up. We're going to see how all these interrelate as we go through this whole idea that we have a life journey, which doesn't really change regardless of what's happening with technology around us. And unless we find that, because the more we're distracted by technology, the less we're going to be able to harness technology in the first
And I
place.
promise to find out more about this lady, and I will
Yeah.
definitely share this.
All right, can we give Mariana a round of applause? Thank you very much. Coming over to this side. Hi, what's your name?
Is it on?
It's on.
Shakti.
Shati, could you stand up so we can all see you? Can we give Shati a round of applause as well?
30 years ago, I was a widow with 2 children. I was just remarried, and 30 years ago, I started up my business, Fit From Within.
Okay, all right. And is that the same business you're running today?
Yeah.
Wow, okay. And so over the last 30 years, has that business achieved your expectations, or what's happened with it?
Yeah, it went beyond my expectations.
Yeah.
And I just developed it. It became more. So it was Pilates, yoga,
Yes.
and then it became mindfulness meditation. Just written a best-selling book on Amazon.
Yes.
And I really focus now on women's empowerment a lot.
Yep.
What's interesting is that a lot of men are coming now. So it's about empowering people to follow their passion.
Right, got it. So what's really interesting is those who are doing the same thing now, you're doing the same thing 30 years later, but lots have changed. Like the fact you bring meditation, whereas 30 years ago, there weren't anything like as many people meditating as there are today. When you're focusing on solving a problem, as opposed to selling a product, you never go out of date, right? As long as you're selling a product, that product's going to go out of date. I mean, most technology companies, their product goes out of date within 12 months. So if you're like, how do I sell more of my product, then you're always going to go out of date, and you're always going to be in anxiety about how quickly technology is changing. But the moment you're actually focusing on your customer, and in both your cases, which in one case is making women happy, and another one is actually making women first of all fit and then empowered. In both cases, you know who your customer is, and you know what the problem is you're looking to solve for them. And when people really see you're solving that problem well, then others will show up as well. In your case, men are showing up now as well. So there's like some really great lessons in here about what creates longevity. We've got this really interesting situation, which has just happened this last month, where we have had 2 businesses that have become trillion-dollar businesses. It's the first time in history that's ever happened. First it was Apple, then it was Amazon. And Jeff Bezos, he says the reason I've been able to build my businesses so much isn't by asking the question, what's going to change? It's simply asking the question, what's going to stay the same? Like, what's going to stay the same? And products are not going to stay the same, but people's problems will stay the same. They'll just be solving them in better ways. And so being really aware of that and knowing that longevity is something we can actually create within ourselves with the right focus allows us to actually find a roadmap for where we're going to be going over this 2 days as well. But that's really awesome, right?
Yeah, and I think I just want to say that the key thing for me has been authentic communication.
Yes.
Like being authentic,
Yes.
being real, being who you are, not trying to be someone you're not.
Yes. So we've heard that from 2 different people now, this concept of being authentic. Why is being authentic so important today? Because the number 1 commodity in the world today is trust. And people are always going to trust people that are being authentic. And they're going to trust people before they trust products, before they trust brands, right? They're going to trust people first. So this is why you find with Virgin, you might have 1 million people following Virgin online, but you've got 20 million people following Virgin Brands. It's because it's about the individual, and it's about what you stand for. And for many of us, we're so not looking at that because we're so busy chasing other things around us as well. So 3 great sharers. Give me all 3 big round of applause. I just want to take you back for a moment and give you a bit of a pathway to what we're doing with the entrepreneur movement, how we got to where we are today, and all these different tools, the genesis of it, like things like Wealth Dynamics, things like Wealth Spectrum. Where did they all come from? Why did I come up with these things? Why did I think that was important? Well, I happen to have a photo of where I was 30 years ago. This is exactly 30 years ago. It's the year 1988. This is what I looked like 30 years ago. So there I am at Cambridge University doing my first little entrepreneurial venture where I'm like drawing these pictures of parts of Cambridge so I can sell them and actually fill up my architecture portfolio. So off I am doing that. And this then led to my first business, which was called Cityscapes. And Cityscapes was doing these maps of different parts, first of all Cambridge, then of Oxford, and then different parts of London. So if you were around 30 years ago, you might have seen we had a partnership with Time Out magazine. We were kind of like in all the tube stations where we actually had like, a little kind of Covent Garden cityscape or a Soho cityscape with all of these different logos of the different shops that all paid money to be on this as well. So that was 30 years ago, and at that point, I was there busy, being an entrepreneur, learning things as I was going, and I wasn't thinking anything about this 30 years ago until earlier this year, in January. Because in January this year, I was in a very cold place in Scotland, where I had thought, well, I don't know how many more holidays I'm going to have with my kids, because they've all grown up, they're going to go do their own things with their own families, with their own friends. So now's the time for me to actually share with them the Hamilton history. So given that I'm a Hamilton, I figured there must be some Hamilton history in Scotland. Sure enough, there was. The Hamilton plan apparently was one of the most powerful plans in Scotland. They helped Robert the Bruce to actually get Scotland independence. They helped the American Prince Scots to get on the throne. And so here was this incredible opportunity to take them out and show them the legacy of the Hamiltons. And the number one legacy was Hamilton Palace, which turns out was the number one palace in all of Europe when it was built 300 years ago. I said, let's go and look at Hamilton Palace. So we went off trekking to Hamilton, of all places, where Hamilton Palace was located. We got there and we found that Hamilton Palace has now been replaced by a Tesco's car park. And it was because the Hamiltons squandered away all their money, right? They basically kind of like sold all their bits and then having left, and at the end of the day, they had to mortgage their house and then they got knocked down. So I was like, well, that's not a very good story. And then from there, realizing that was the case, it's like, well, maybe that's not such a good Hamilton legacy after all. That was actually the Hamilton mausoleum, was the only thing left, the dead Hamilton, right? Everything else is gone. So we were like, okay, all right. So then we're going back to Holiday Inn at the airport, at Glasgow Airport, which is the one which is like on the other side of the entry exit to the airport. And we're walking through, and what should happen, but I would come across this. It was my cityscape. So it was my 30-year-old picture still, because I sold the business and went on to other things, and the cityscape company that still runs it hasn't even updated the map. It's still map. It's the same map I drew when I was like 30 years ago. So it's like, all right, they just kind of like put it on a graphic thing now, and you can still see all the like different shops and things are all on there and that kind of thing as well. So I'm there thinking, wow, 30 years later, what was different? Those cityscapes, I get so excited because one of those cityscapes, after 3 months of work, would make us £10,000. I was like, £10,000 is a fortune. And now I think, well, what's the difference of £10,000 and £10 million? Well, actually, it's only a couple of zeros. Right? So now I'm still doing the same thing. It's just instead of actually doing something like a map, I'm doing something like buying a resort, right? Or instead of something like going out and seeing a retailer who's going to pay us £120, we're going out and actually having partners who are coming into our tech company and paying £100,000. So these are all just different zeros, but it's the same story, which is what's the skill set of being an entrepreneur in the first place. And we're going to talk about this concept of the power of zero. The reason it's so important to talk about this is because if we were to think that in the last 30 years, wherever you are today is by design, right? There's no question that everything you have today, you designed it. What you're earning today, you designed that amount. What you have as your challenges today, you designed those challenges. What you have as your people issues or with your kind of like blind spots, these are all things you designed into your life. Now, for many of us, are like, why would I design those things in? I'm not enjoying life the way it is right now. I'd rather it would be different. It's like, how could I possibly design that? Well, the chances you are, because someone said, well, how did you do that? How do you get to a point where you have no time to be with your family? Well, it's because I started this business, and then I didn't get the right people, and then I didn't get the right market share, and then this happened, and now I've got to spend my time fixing it, so I don't have time. So then you can always find a way as to why what happened. The only difference is some of us designed our life deliberately, others designed it accidentally. It's like, well, that was my design, but it wasn't like I really thought about it at the time. So I'm living in the world and the consequences. I'm just doing it because that's what ended up being the result of the design. I didn't know that was going to be the result. When in the truth, if you really thought about it, you could have met someone or spoke to someone who would have told you that was going to be your result. Which is why mentoring is such a big thing today, because there's people that already have tracked your path, they've actually made the mistakes you already made, and simply it's a matter of actually just going to those people to find out what does your future hold, so you don't end up going out and making the same mistakes others have made as well. But most of us, we're at a point today where we haven't stopped to say, well, if that was my last 30 years, what's my next 30 years going to look like? Like, you have a chance today to design your next 30 years. So what do you want yourself to look like 30 years from now? Think of your current age, add 30 to that. I'm going to be 80 years old, right? I'm going to be 18. So whatever your age is, that's going to be 30 years of your life where you get to design it to be exactly what you want it to be. And provided you give yourself a long enough time frame and you're clear enough about what it's going to be, you'll find a way to get there. But most of us, we haven't got that clarity, which is why we never get there. So now you've got that thought process. Why 30 years? Why is this important now? Why should it be an obligation that we must be successful instead of an opportunity? Why? Because of these kind of stories that are coming out. This here was a story from February this year. It is about a gentleman who is known as the grandfather of artificial intelligence. So he's from Europe. He's the director of the Swiss AI Lab, and his name is Jürgen Schmittenberg. And he basically has been talking a lot about the singularity, which is that moment where computers become more intelligent than humans, right? So this is where artificial intelligence surpasses our ability to think, to calculate, and are able to then create new artificial intelligence, which is even more powerful than they are. And as that starts to accelerate and grow, we have no idea where that's going to go. So it's called the singularity, because it's that moment at which nothing's predictable after that point. And this is something that's been talked about for many years, first of all by science fiction writers and then by scientists. There's now Singularity University, which I'm part of, which is out in Silicon Valley. We're now seeing this showing up in the next 30 years, right? Within the next 30 years, this is going to happen. We're seeing this actually being reported. Here's a Time magazine cover, 2045, the year man becomes immortal. It's that moment at which you can download your memories and your thoughts into a computer, and you actually are then going to effectively outlive your own body. When we start seeing this kind of thinking, and this graph is an exponential graph, which shows the exponential growth of computing power. This one specifically is how much computing power can you buy for $1,000? So this is put together by Ray Kurzweil, who is a futurist who talks a lot about singularity. And you can see here that in the year 2015, which was only 3 years ago, 2015, $1,000 could buy you the same computing power as a mouse. And now, by the time we get to 2023, which is only 5 years away, you'll be able to get the same computing power as a human. And by the time we get to 2045, which is 30 years from now, you'll have the same computing power for $1,000 as all of humanity put together, 7 billion humans. And that is the speed of growth at which we're going through. This leads to unintended consequences. I came back, and I was showing this yesterday, I came back to 2 articles. My first 2 articles that I read when I came back from Burning Man. We had no contact with the outside world while we were at Burning Man. Once we came back, it's like, hey, what's going on in the world? This is what I saw. BBC, Bank of England chief economist warns of AI jobs threat. Chief economist of the Bank of England has warned that UK will need a skills revolution to avoid large swaths of people becoming technologically unemployed as artificial intelligence makes many jobs obsolete. Says this will be on a much greater scale than anything felt during the first industrial revolution of the Victorian era. And here we have on the right, Amazon just became the second company to reach $1 trillion. Here's how much Jeff Bezos is worth now. And this story, which just came out this week, says not only has Amazon become $1 trillion business after Apple, but Jeff Bezos' fortune has now grown. His fortune is now at $160 billion. So the wealthiest person in the world in January this year, that was still Bill Gates. He was at around about 80 billion. Jeff Bezos overtook him in January. By February, he was already at 100 billion. He's now gone to 180 billion, which means he's made as much wealth in the last 8 months as Bill Gates made in his whole life, right? The wealthiest person in the world. He's done that. And you can see there at the bottom it says that at this rate, Jeff Bezos' net worth has been increasing this year at roughly $260 million per day. Imagine that, going to your ATM machine, putting in your ATM every day, right? So a lot of people look at this and go, that's not fair. How does that be fair, right? And so this whole 1% thing, which is like Jeff Bezos rich because he's making everyone else poor, is I'm thinking of like wealth as a pie, where there's a finite amount. We know that's not the truth. It's not a finite. He didn't want to make anyone poor. He's actually making a lot of other people successful in order to make that money. But it's as a result of this exponential growth of technology and his ability to ride that technology by understanding that technology, which is allowing him to have a much, much greater impact. And one of the outcomes of that impact is his own wealth. Right? It's not about making money at the cost of other people. It's how to make money at a way that actually is a benefit to other people. And of course, he's now taking that money back. There's this news that came out today, this morning, that Jack Ma has retired from Alibaba. He's done. He's like, I'm done from Alibaba, right? I've got so much money now. I'm going to spend the rest of my life doing what Bill Gates did. I'm going to focus on education. That's his number one thing. And I'm going to actually then revolutionize education using the same brain that created Alibaba. And that's my focus now. And my number one thing is education. So first thing I'm doing is getting in contact with Jack Ma and saying, right, you've got time on your hands now. Because when you've got that ability to know that you have that power to make that difference, and every one of us has that as well. It's that ability to know that wealth isn't how much money you have today. Wealth is what you got if you lose all your money. If you didn't even have the money, what you're actually going to do tomorrow, which is the connections you have, the knowledge you have, and the inspiration and vision that you have for the future you want to create. So we all have that chance to recreate that at any moment. But how do we do it? Hands up who has heard of the rice and chessboard story? Hands up, anyone here? So minority, some of you have. So this is something which used to be talked about as a mathematical idea. It has, in the last 10 years, become a very big topic of conversation in Silicon Valley as a technological idea. And the reason for this is I'm going to show you, first of all, the story, which is all about exponential growth, and then the fact that we are living at a time where we are what in Silicon Valley they say is the second half of the chessboard. So first of all, listen to this story. It's actually told by someone called James McAfee, who is an economist, and you're going to hear him talk about the story because it's the ancient story of the origin of chess, and it's very well documented. You can go look online, you'll find the story as well. But let's listen to the story and see what the consequences of this are, given that we are living this slither of time, which will never ever occur again.
An old story that I find very helpful, and it's a story about the inventor of the game of chess. The legend goes that the inventor took his creation to the Emperor of India and showed him the game. And the emperor was so impressed by the beauty and elegance of the game of chess that he said, "You can name your own reward. Majesty, I'm a humble man. All I want is a pile of rice. Put 1 grain of rice on the first square of this chessboard. Double that, put 2 grains of rice on the second square. Double that, continue on. And when we've got 64 squares full of rice, just give me that quantity of rice." And the emperor says, "You really are a humble man. Make it so." Now, those of us who have had a little bit of math realize how much trouble the emperor is in, because that constant doubling adds up over time, and it reaches numbers that absolutely stagger the imagination. After 32 squares, there are a few billion grains of rice, which is a lot, but that's about as much as you would get from harvesting one large field. It's only when you get in the second half of the chessboard that things get really, really strange. So by the time they've covered 64 squares of the chessboard, there's a pile of rice bigger than Mount Everest, and it's more rice than has been produced by all of humanity in the entire history of the world. When the emperor realizes how badly he's been tricked by the inventor, he has the guy beheaded. He cuts off his head. So we did some quick calculations. The United States started tracking information technology as a category of corporate investment in about 1958. And if you take the normal doubling period of Moore's Law is 18 months, you take 32 of those doubling periods and you add that to 1958, it turns out that we entered the second half of the chessboard when it comes to digital technology in about 2006. So since 2006, we've seen the explosion of social media. We've seen the arrival of smartphones and tablets. We've seen computers that can now drive cars. We've seen humanoid robots in factories. We have seen a computer be the world champion in the quiz show Jeopardy. All these things have happened since 2006. So to me, that means that we are in some new phase. Maybe we have just started the second half of the chessboard when it comes to the power and the impact of digital technologies. And if what I've just said is true, if there's any truth to it, there's one conclusion, and that conclusion is we haven't seen anything yet. And I firmly believe that the digital innovations that are going to come and that are going to affect the business world are going to be absolutely transformative in the not too distant future. If that's the case, the only smart strategy at the top of the enterprise is, again, to embrace and to start leading the digital transformation for your company.
All right, Andrew, we're happy. So he's written about this at length, right? This is what he says. He says, Moore's Law started in 1958, and computing power is doubled every 18 months. By that calculation, we entered the second half of the chessboard with digital progress in about 2006. For me, that really helps me to understand why we're seeing smartphones, self-driving cars, automatic translation, powerful artificial intelligence, and some amazing creative technologies. I think on the second half of the chessboard technologies. It was actually back in 2006 that the iPhone first came out. It was before we had smartphones, which all happened over this period. It's when YouTube's launched, it's when people started using Facebook, all of it within the last 12 years. 12 years gives you one row of that chessboard. It's now 2018. We're at the end of the first row. We've got 3 more rows to go. So within the next 30 years, we're going to complete all of those rows. And so during that time, every single one of those 12 years will be multiplication on what happened in the 12 years before. And so by us just thinking in that way and realizing that we have no idea what kind of technology is going to show up, we just know it's going to be this massive change, and most of the world's going to be left behind because they haven't really even appreciated just how much this exponential has got to the stage where it's at right now. But you're here, right? Which means that you know better, right? We're going to actually be at a point where we're going to say we have to grow up and we have to realize that we're at a point where technology can potentially destroy us, but it could also potentially be our best friend. And how do we use our own consciousness to actually ensure that we ended up being where we wanted to be? I'm going to now take you through the first 5 of 10 trends, which gives you a bit of a sense. For some of you, it will excite you. For some of you, it will confuse you. For some of you, it would be frightening as to just how much things are changing at the moment. I'm going to show you a few videos to kind of like give you a point as well. And you're going to have a chance to then have a conversation with the person next to you. Which of these 5 are the ones that you could imagine yourself either writing or you could imagine would disrupt your industry, which means that whether you write it, whether you sing, whether you swim, whether you surf, it's going to come whether you like it or not. This here is a curve which is from Gerd Leonard, who is a futurist, from a book called The Digital Transformation of Business Society. You can see all of the things in blue and green are really waves that have already started. The ones that are in gray are the ones that are starting right now. So there's actually a time frame to all of these to go as well. And all of the 5 that I'm going to mention are linked in one form or another to some of these as well. We're going to see here from 10 to 6, 5 trends, mobile and social we all know of already, that continues to accelerate. We're now going from what was like mass social, the likes of Facebook, Instagram, to now niche social, where we're actually getting people getting focused in groups, very much like what we're doing with Genius U, which we're going to talk more about today. Internet of Things is everything to do with sensors. It's the drones you see flying around. It's the fact that everything is now getting interconnected in new ways. Smart homes and appliances is like, at the moment, the largest land grab is where the likes of Amazon, with Echo, with the likes of Google Home, this is where everyone is currently fighting with voice recognition for the home. And then we've got robot cars and drones, which is now really taking off. Blockchain distributed trust is the latest wave that we've seen jump up and now crash down, and now it's going to be coming back up again. And each of these has got some pretty incredible graphs behind them. So for example, in the Internet of Things, which is all linked back to sensors and how digital products or digital sensors are going to actually be communicating with each other far more than humans are. We've got 7 billion people on the planet, which means that most people can ever actually get connected is 7 billion. At the moment, it's about 4 billion. And you can see here that we've got 50 billion by 2020 devices that are going to be connected. So that's 50 billion compared to 5 billion. It's a 10 times growth rate in terms of machines connecting with each other compared to humans connecting with each other. I'm going to show you this video, which a couple of years ago we would have thought would be kind of like science fiction. But today, we look at the video, we just laugh at it. It's actually an April Fool's video. It's from Amazon. But it was, and it came out this year. But the thing about this video was that it's actually already poking fun at something Amazon already has, which I'm sure many of you have as well, which is the Amazon Alexa, which you can talk to and it talks back to you as well. So this one here is the end possibility of what happens as Alexa starts to crash. And I'm sure some of you have seen this. Kind of funny little video, but imagine this actually being reality where in a few years we look at it and go, that's not even funny anymore because actually it's exactly what we're doing. This is the story of the Amazon Alexa.
In Austin, it's 60 degrees with a Alexa?
Amazon's Alexa lost her voice this morning.
Alexa lost her voice? How's that even possible?
We have the replacements ready, just say the word.
And you're sure this would work?
Yeah.
Alexa, show me a recipe for a grilled cheese sandwich.
Pathetic. You're 32 years of age and you don't know how to make a grilled cheese sandwich. Its name is the recipe, you...
Alexa, how far is Mars?
Oh, how far is Mars? Well, how am I supposed to know? I've never been there. This guy want to go to Mars. For what? There's not even oxygen there.
Alexa, set the mood.
Now setting the mood. You're in the bush. And you're just so dirty and so sweaty because it's hot in that bush.
Alexa, reboot.
Looks like play some country music.
Don't dance now, I make money move.
No, Alexa, country music.
What's it called, Brandon?
I'm afraid Brandon is a little tied up. But do let me know if there's anything I can help you with. Jessica? Good boy.
Thanks, guys, but I'll take it from here.
For sure, where you're going to be able to choose your celebrity and they're going to just be able to chat with you or sing your lullabies or whatever you like. This is all going to happen in the next couple of years, and it's already, voice recognition is already at the point where it can replicate anyone's voice. So we're seeing this happen at such a rapid speed. And of course, every one of us in this room has the opportunity to write any one of these ways and see an opportunity and jump into it as well, which is why we're going to start with some of these things and saying, well, how do we make the most of it? I'm going to just jump straight to this one, blockchain distributed trust. So I was back here in July because we ran a blockchain accelerator. We ran it with WeWork, so we did a partnership with WeWork. They had a whole group of different blockchain companies. They didn't have the resources or the tools to actually run accelerators. We run our accelerator programs at our resource in Bali in South Africa. So we teamed up together. We said, okay, we'll do at the WeWork offices, which we actually ran here in London, a blockchain accelerator where we had about a dozen, 2 dozen blockchain companies that came on board and worked with it. Hands up who here has a pretty good idea of how blockchain works. Who has a pretty good idea? Hands up who doesn't have that good idea of how it works. Okay, so majority. I'm going to show you a little video, first of all, about blockchain. It's like a 2-minute video. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you why we are currently at a point which is so similar to 1996, 97, like 10 years ago, when the dot-com boom started, and where this boom with blockchain is by far 100 to 1,000 times the size of what has spawned the likes of Amazon and Facebook and Google and all of these companies that were only possible as a result of the dot-com boom. And I'm going to explain why that is as well, because the moment you appreciate even just a percentage of what I'll share, you'll change everything you're doing. Right, so first of all, here is the video, which just has a very simple explanation of what blockchain is.
When you vote, have you ever wondered whether your ballot is actually counted? If you meet someone online, how do you know they're who they say they are? When you buy coffee that's labeled fair trade, what makes you so certain of its origin? To be sure, really sure, about any of those questions, you need a system where records could be stored, facts could be verified by anyone, and security is guaranteed. That way, no one could cheat the system by editing records, because everyone using the system would be watching. Systems like this are on the horizon, and the software that powers them is called a blockchain. Blockchains store information across a network of personal computers, making them not just decentralized, but distributed. This means no central company or person owns the system, yet everyone can use it and help run it. This is important because it means it's difficult for any one person to take down the network or corrupt it. The people who run the system use their computer to hold bundles of records submitted by others, known as blocks, in a chronological chain. The blockchain uses a form of math called cryptography to ensure that records can't be counterfeited or changed by anyone else. You've probably heard of the blockchain's first killer app, a form of digital cash called Bitcoin that you can send to anyone, even a complete stranger. Bitcoin is different from credit cards, PayPal, or other ways to send money because there isn't a bank or financial middleman involved. Instead, people from all over the world help move the digital money by validating others' Bitcoin transactions with their personal computers, earning a small fee in the process. Bitcoin uses the blockchain by tracking records of ownership over this digital cash, so only one person can be the owner at a time and the cash can't be spent twice, like counterfeit money in the physical world can. But Bitcoin is just the beginning for blockchains. In the future, blockchains that manage and verify online data could enable us to launch companies that are entirely run by algorithms, making self-driving cars safer, help us protect our online identities, and even track the billions of devices on the Internet of Things. These innovations will change our lives forever, and it's all just beginning. To learn more about the urgent future of the blockchain, please visit iftf.org/blockchainfutureslab.
All right, hopefully that's cool. Okay, so if we were back at the beginning of the dot-com boom and you're like, what's the point of having an internet address? What's the point of having a web page? And someone was to explain to you, because the moment that you set up a web page, you're getting yourself a digital address for your company. If you have a digital address for your company, which is called an IP address, if you have a digital address for your company, it means anyone anywhere in the world can get to you with zero friction, right? They can just straight away just kind of contact, and there you have your website. That's how Amazon got so big. That's how Google got so big. Anyone anywhere can go straight to them. But all that's doing is giving you a digital address to the company. And up to now, anything else related to that company, whether it's a picture on the website, whether it's a product you've got on there, was linked to that company address, that IP address. What blockchain is giving every single asset in your, like everything, an address. Everything. My shoes can have an address. Like this clicker can have an address. The next photo you take has an address. Everything has an address, which means it's fully trackable, and at any point, anywhere, anyone can trade it with somebody else, and as a result of that, it becomes an asset. So the moment you realize that we're going from things that were companies that had addresses, and then we all got individual addresses for our Facebook page or whatever that happens to be. It's still individuals or companies. We realize that's now to all things. Everything has an address, which is obviously a large multiplier on how many companies there are. Then it actually gets rid of all the middlemen, including companies. And in the future, if you actually want to go and buy a particular toaster, well, every toaster would have an address, which would be on the blockchain. And you'd be able to actually decide to buy whichever one's best for you. And you might not buy it from a company, you might buy it from an individual. You could buy it from a second-hand, it doesn't matter where you buy it from, because it's still valid that this is now owned by you. And this goes for property, this goes for currencies, this goes for everything. So suddenly, everything changes the moment trust has gone from the point that I trust this company, that when I click in www.google.com, it will go to Google. Now, I'm going to be able to actually put in any address of any particular product or any particular thing, and I'm going to actually find out exactly who owns it, where it's been, where it's going. And the moment that happens, then trust now takes itself to its nth layer, which is to the actual consumption or the production of whatever it is you're doing in the first place. Hopefully that explains it a little bit, that at the end of the day, if you think of it in that way, that all lawyers really will disappear. So the only thing a lawyer is doing is being the middleman to verify that something is trustworthy. Whereas if every agreement, if every asset has got its own, if every share in a company has got its own address, you don't need the lawyer to be there. Accountants who just manage the balance sheet books, you don't need those. Because every time a dollar comes in, you can actually allocate to who's going to pay for, what day it pays it to them, and that contract already is built into that movement of money, which means you don't actually have to have accountants to manage any of that. You realize that governments who are there to actually make sure that we ourselves have that ability to trust people coming in and out of the country. The moment we're all on the blockchain, we won't actually need that verification anymore because we'll all be having that digital address. It just changes not just the speed of flow, but it also changes the cost of flow, which goes down to almost zero. Banks, pretty much anything that's a middleman suddenly doesn't exist in the same way, and every one of them is up for disruption right now, in the same way that when the dot-com boom happened, no one was prepared for it. The number of media companies that have actually disappeared, the number of retail companies that have disappeared, because they didn't know just how much this was going to change their business model. Every one of our business models is going to change in the next 10 years as a result of blockchain. So that is one of just the top 5. This is from 10 to 6. It's not the biggest 5, which are the next ones I'll get to this afternoon. It's just from 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Have a think about which one of these you're either most excited about or that you can see is going to create the most disruption, because this isn't just about something for you to be aware of, it's something that you could actually end up starting a business around by just realizing, by knowing this now, the people who are the ones starting businesses are not the ones who are the most qualified to do it, they're just simply the ones who are in the position to take action to do it. Take a moment and share with the person next to you which of these 5 actually excites you the most.
While they are busy discussing this and what really excites them most between number 10, 9, 8, 7, and 6, I hope you're all able to see. Sorry about my movement of my hands this morning. My hands are actually aching me today. Bringing to you as well and acknowledging Louise, Shalom, Geoffrey Aljenga, Andrew N. Kamanu, Olawama Yosei, Elizabeth James, Prince Jogu, Anton, Giorgio, Tele Achiva, Ole Teje, Richie Roy, Banakakitu, Jennifer Ario, Baseki, lovely to see you, Jimmy Larry, and everyone who is joining in this morning. Kisa Junior all the way in Kenya, Donald Ikwebu, Albert Kichumba all the way in Kenya, thank you so much for staying in with us as well. And of course, very Roger Hamilton in town. So Roger Hamilton in town, and we are learning. Today is all about learning. And anytime he's here in town, I make an effort in coming to see him, just to ensure that I'm reminding myself about the impact meter, which I shared around in July. For those who watched in July, if you go to my Facebook in July, I talked about the impact meter, and of course I spoke about the genius in you. There's certain things that we also have to build for ourselves, and everyone is special in this world. I want you to be special in this world. Be you, learn from others, take what is good and bring it to life. Juliet Macapila speaking live in London.
So now while I'm giving just the headliners here, we have like a Changemaker Forum after lunch where you're going to actually be hearing from some companies that are actually starting up in blockchain, people that are actually already been growing business in augmented reality and all these different technologies, and they didn't do it by becoming experts in those technologies. They did it through something quite different. And over the next 2 hours from now through lunchtime, we're going to be focusing at what that difference is, right? So what is this thing we should be focusing at? Think about it a bit like a wave. If every one of these is a big wave, if you're trying to catch a wave, there's a good chance you'll miss every time if you're waiting to see what other people are doing. Because if you try and surf a wave, anyone who's surfing a wave, it's too late for you to surf it. So if you're looking for the clues to say, well, who's already doing something, I should go do that, it's too late to do it. So there's something that happens as the waves get bigger and bigger, is that we need to be thinking different about what our state is with that wave. Now, by the way, most of schooling and most of what we're taught by our parents is that if we're in a situation where things aren't going well, we have 1 or 2 options, which is either sink or swim. So many of us are thinking in that way as well. Like, how do I either just stay afloat? How do I just keep a job, right? Or how do I swim as hard as I can? You can't swim against a big wave. It's impossible, right? And if you think sinking is the other option, that's not a good option. Well, what entrepreneurs get is there is a third option, and the third option is to surf. That's the third option. That's what entrepreneurs do. And the way they do it is not by trying to hold on to the wave. They do it by holding on to the board. So the biggest issue is, what is my board? What is the thing that is rock solid I need to hold on to, because it can't be the wave, because the waves are going to keep on changing. And that thing you need to hold on to is the thing which actually is your self-awareness of who you are. Because each one of us is individually different, and the more we can become ourselves, the more authentic we become, the more we can surf any wave. And there is a science to this now. We've learned enough about what it is to actually get to self-awareness that we can actually replicate this and get to clarity in a way that we don't get to clarity when we're at school. We don't get to clarity when we're in a job. And that's what we're going to be doing in the next two hours to actually get to that. One of those tools is WAF Dynamics, right? But there's other tools into that as well. So before we get into WAF Dynamics and explain why getting clarity on who you are and what your genius is so important, I just want to revisit for a moment this. Many of you have heard me talk about this, the power of zero, and how the power of zero links to all of this. You've got to start with the beginner's mind, back to zero, back to nothing. And the moment when we do that, it starts shifting everything in terms of who we are. Some of you haven't heard me talk about this before, because it's the first time you've actually come to see me. So as a bit of a refresher, I'm going to actually put this symbol up here, which actually is a number which only has been in our numbering system for the last 500 years. It was Fibonacci from Pisa who brought this after going to India and seeing this in India. It was something called Zefiro. And what he did was he brought it back and said, this is really, really valuable. They use it in the Indian numbering system. We should use it in our numbering system as well. People said, what's the point of having it? And they said, well, it's kind of like a placeholder, which means that you can actually multiply everything by 10 by using it that way. But it also is a symbol of a new code, right? So this Zefiro became 2 things. It became cipher, which is a code. So it's something to decode. And it also became 0, which is the placeholder. So another way to think about this is that this is nothing and everything at the same time. In China, they call this Wuji. It's the symbol of all things and nothing. It's the symbol of the universe. So if you were, for example, to take something like me going to Japan. If I go to Japan and I don't speak Japanese, then it's 0. It means nothing to me. The moment that I learn Japanese, I decipher it, is the moment that nothing becomes everything. And it becomes more than just like a replication of English. It gives me concepts like ichi to ichi, which don't even exist as a word in the English lexicon, right? So then it's like, it gives me more. So every one of these zeros opens up a new doorway. If you know how to make £10,000, but you don't yet know how to make £100,000, the only difference is 1 0. But it is a different universe, because the people easily making £100,000, they've just got different language and different world in which they're working. They're working with teams in ways that people at £10,000 are not doing. People that are £1 million, which is another 0, well, again, they're doing that easily, but they're doing it using capital as opposed to just using their efforts. And so at every one of these levels, if you want to actually just add a 0 in, it requires you just turning that combination lock and understanding what that world looks like, and then stepping into it. And most of us aren't doing that, which is why we get to a glass ceiling at one level of 0 or another. And every one of us can add zeros in, and then we can add zeros to our impact as well. That's the power of 0. And it really gets down to the nitty-gritty. This is a slide from Elon Musk. If we can get back to slides, please. This slide here is something he said 10 years ago. And the global financial crisis, 2008, my proceeds from PayPal were 180 million. I put 100 million in SpaceX, 70 million in Tesla, 10 million in Solar City. I had to borrow money for rent. He was at 0. He's now worth $20 billion within 10 years. And it was because he was willing to say, I'll risk it all. Because when you have nothing to lose, you have everything to gain. When you have 0 possibility, you have 100% opportunity, right? That's what happens the moment you actually go back down to 0. And many of us, the reason that we aren't going forward is that we're trying to hold on to something we think we have, when in fact, if we just said, well, actually, it's not even important. If I started from nothing, that's not a bad place to start from. I could really then move to something much, much bigger than I'm doing today. So this concept of 0 kind of links in. Mahatma Gandhi talked about this as well. When you make yourself into 0, your power becomes invincible. The moment you actually say, I've got nothing to lose, right? Because of everything you have that you could be gaining. We have got within the Wealth Lighthouse a number of different zeros. And by the way, just so that we really get clear why this is so important as a 0, as this concept here, I'd like you to just take a moment with the person next to you. If you've seen me before, you might have heard me asking this before, but for many of you who haven't, you got a chance to hear this for the first time. Think about this as a circle, and think about how many sides a circle has. Because like people have different opinions, right? Like maybe it's got no sides, maybe it's got 1 side, maybe it's got 2, 3, 4 more infinity sides. How many sides does a circle have? Take a moment, like 2 seconds, turn to the person next to you and tell them how many sides you think a circle has. Okay, thank you. Thank you. All right. That was 2 seconds. Okay. Hands up. Hands up. Who said that a circle has no sides? No sides. Quite a lot of hands for no sides. Hands up who said a circle has 1 side? Yep, quite a lot of hands for 1 side. Hands up who said a circle has 2 sides? Right, quite a lot of hands for 2 sides. Hands up who thinks a circle has 3 or more sides? 3 or more sides? No. Hands up who thinks a circle has infinity sides? We just went through every single possibility of how many sides a circle has, from 0 to infinity, and there were hands up for every single one. How are we going to agree on complicated things like world peace if we can't even agree? Well, luckily I went to Cambridge University, so I come with great authority to tell you how many sides a circle has. A circle actually has got 2 sides. And inside and then outside.
Yes, a circle has 2 sides, inside and outside.
But inside and outside, in that what's really interesting is we have these shapes that we think about, but we never really think about the difference of inside and outside. Like, for example, if you're playing football, soccer, cricket, right? If you're playing a game, is there a difference of the people on the inside of the pitch and the ones on the outside? Yes. Big difference. And they're all playing the game, but the ones on the inside have a much higher level of commitment. You know, the ones on the outside, often the ones on the outside think they know more about the game than the ones on the inside. Why do you have to referee? Okay, so, but the ones on the outside can go get a hot dog. I mean, they can do whatever they want, and it doesn't change the game. Whereas you can't do that when you're inside. So I take that and it's going to go off in the middle. It's like, it's a World Cup, stay on, right? So you can't do that. So there's a level of commitment when you're on the inside. But then there's also a mindset shift, which is very, very different. Because think something like outcomes, right? Like for a lot of people on the outside, they think success is about outcome, right? It's about what is my goals? What am I going to achieve? What do I get? Like, you know, oh, that person has money, I want that too. Well, they're not people playing the game. They're the commentators, they're the spectators. Because the ones on the inside, they're not thinking about outcome. They're thinking about income. And I don't mean income just in terms of cash income. I'm talking income in terms of opportunities income. I'm talking about trust income. I'm talking about incoming. It's like, is the ball coming my way, right? Is it coming to me, right? So this is all about what is it that I'm actually passing on to others as opposed to what is it I'm getting. And it's a whole different mindset. Think of this in terms of effort. On the outside, it's about output. It's like, I just got to work as hard as I can work. If I can work really, really, really hard, then I'll be actually better off. Inside's not thinking about output. They're not trying to run as fast as they can run. They're thinking about input. They're thinking about what is it I'm adding to this game, right? What is it that I'm actually adding in terms of my own knowledge? What's the input that's happening as opposed to how hard I'm output? If every day you said, it's not about my output today, it's about my to-do list. It's about my input. It's about what am I actually learning? What am I actually getting connected to? Life changes because most of us are actually thinking we're playing the game when we're just spectating. And that's why we're not getting the result. In fact, the biggest one, this is a joke between Cambridge and Oxford. We used to say this, that Oxford was the town of dream inspired, but Cambridge was the town of inspiring dreams. This is the biggest one, right? Is that on the inside, you will always inspire. Whereas if you're on the outside, you will expire. This is the story of Jeff Bezos, and then others out there that are like, I can't get a job. So stepping into the line, making it a must, which is like, this is an obligation now. I'm playing the game, right? This is a real thing happening right now. When I basically am 150 years old, and I've got my great-grandchildren sitting on my knee, I do not want them looking at my Facebook page and seeing at that time when the world needed you, at that time when there were people who were suffering, when there was inequality, when there was poverty, you were out there taking photos of fun times when you could have actually been out there making a difference in the world. I don't want to be that person that's on the outside when that judgment day comes, and that judgment day is already on us. So this element, and it sounds heavy, but at the same time it can be inspiring, because it actually think, yeah, why not? Why shouldn't I be stepping up into my greatest power? Because this is the time the world needs it most. Like, this is what it is to be an entrepreneur today, and that's why this is so exciting. When we were in Japan, we were talking about the samurai. The samurai were the inspiration for the entire culture of Japan. Today, we are the modern-day samurai. Right? We're the ones that actually have the opportunity to now step up and ride these waves, provided we know what it is that we're actually armoring ourselves with in the first place. And that's where we get to the Wealth Lighthouse. So this is the idea that every one of us has got within ourselves a voice, which is what actually links to this control tower. This Wealth Lighthouse has got 9 different levels, which are the 9 different levels of consciousness, which allow you to actually operate a business or to create a movement. And at the same time, this lighthouse has got 4 sides. And these 4 sides are the 4 sides of the Wealth Dynamic Square. So think of this like the base of the lighthouse. If any of you have heard the myth or the legend of the lighthouse of Alexandria, this is what this is based on, right? And this was like Alexander the Great, who had his own mentor, who was Aristotle. And Aristotle basically told him to go get the Emerald Tablet, bring it back to the West. He did that. He brought it to Egypt. He created a city in his own name, Alexander, which he called Alexandria, which was on basically the mouth of the Nile. And from Alexandria, he created this lighthouse of Alexandria. And so this was like a symbol of humanity. It was like the view of adventure when you actually left out to sea, and it was the view of safety when you came back to home as well. And this lighthouse, we all are in it already today. Carl Jung talked about this. He talked about it as your collective unconscious. So how do we know if we're in the lighthouse or not? Where are we in the lighthouse? Think of this like a little voice in your head. So think about that. Do you have a little voice in your head? Okay. So some of you are like, yeah, I have a little voice in my head. Some of you are like, I'm not sure. Do I have a voice in my head? The thing that says, do I have a voice in my head? That's the voice in my head, right? So we're all got a voice in our head. But the voice in our head actually has different levels of consciousness. Right? I mean, hands up who's ever been in a situation where life has got really, really, really tough, and no matter what you do, things aren't working, and that voice in your head is even saying, stuff's not working. Hands up who's been in that situation where you're like, we've all been there, right? And then hands up who's been in a situation where things have been just like incredible. No matter what happens, it turns to gold. Everyone is like loving you. It's like, how is all this amazing synchronicity happening? And so as a result, you get super overconfident almost because everything's going so well. Hands up who's had that experience. Same hands, right? Like we all had both sides. And so we actually find that that voice in our heads, it will actually tune in to somewhere in terms of these 9 levels, and at the same time is naturally around one of these different areas of the square as well. I'll get more into those 9 levels this afternoon. This afternoon we're going to talk about those 9 levels and realize why most of us get stuck at a level of enterprise where we can't go to the next level, and then we can't start new things because we haven't figured it out yet. But in terms of the Wealth Dynamic Square, this is about knowing that this lighthouse has got a north side, a south side, east side, west side. You can actually draw this down as I do this as well. Because what we're going to do in a moment is we're going to actually split up this room where you're going to get to meet other people of the same profile as you and realize we're looking out the same window, right? We're seeing things in the same way, we've got the same challenges as each other, and as a result, we have a way to build a powerful team that allows us to surf anyway as well, right? You can't surf your surfboard on your own. It's going to have to be with the team. So it's about knowing what your team's going to be. So this is the North Sound, the South Side, the East Side, the West Side, and this also links to a particular equation, and the equation is that this is the equation to flow, that wealth equals value times leverage, right? So think of this a little bit like a river, where for water to flow, you would always need high ground and low ground. And it will always flow in that direction, from high to low. And so this is height differential. With money, which is also flow, money will always flow, not from high ground to low ground, but from high value to low value. So if I'm selling my shoes, for example, I'm going to sell my shoes for $1,000. Well, if someone comes along and says, well, I'll buy your shoes for $1,000, they clearly value my shoes more than their $1,000. I value it less, I'd rather have $1,000. And so as a result of that, their money flows from them to me, and my shoes will then pass to them, right? So that all money is value exchange, right? It's just basically that's how it flows. And if I wanted 10 times, I want to make 10 times as much money, not $1,000, but $10,000, I have two choices. One choice is to make shoes worth 10 times more. Maybe I'll get them worn by a celebrity, maybe I'll get them better materials, maybe I'll find someone who needs them 10 times more, but I will find a way to either increase the value 10 times, which means I'm increasing the speed of money flow. At the same moment, there'll be $10,000 instead of $1,000 flowing. Or I can say, I'll have the same shoes, I'll just sell 10 of them, which is volume, right? This is called leverage, which is basically finding that, and all wealth is just a flow of value and leverage. And everyone who's figured this out, they've just said, am I actually growing my value at this point, or am I growing my leverage at this point? And if you just focus on these two things, you can always find a way to 10 times what you're doing. And when I'm mentoring or working with people in their companies, I can see very quickly the way to do it, whereas most of us are just busy in activity where we're not turning these two levers, right? This is how a river flows. And the most important thing is knowing that there are two opposites to value, and there's two opposites to leverage, and every one of us has a natural path of how we do it. But most of us aren't even necessarily aware you can only do one opposite at a time. So everyone try this. Everyone just hold your arms for a moment. Fold your arms. Okay, so the interesting thing about folding your arms is you did it naturally. You didn't even think about it. But if you look around to the people on right and left and look at how they're folding their arms, see if they're folding the same way as you or the opposite to you. Some are right over left, some are left over right. Okay. On the count of three, everyone do the opposite. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. So half the people in the room are like, okay, 1, 2, 3. You're about the same way. Okay, but some of you did the opposite. If you did the opposite, does it actually feel more natural? It doesn't. And if you check it out, everyone check it out. If at any point today you fold your arms again, you would go back to the natural way. So even if you learn how to do the opposite, you can always go back to natural. And so many of us, that's what's happening in our life. We're doing something which feels easy, and then we're then having to try and figure out how to do something that's hard work. When that's easy for someone else, there's no point doing that at all. So the most important thing is to know that your talents, which is your genius, is something which naturally comes to you anyway. And we already have a natural way to do it. You can't do both at the same time. So for example, we've got people at the top here. You would have someone like a creator, which is like a Bill Gates or a Steve Jobs, someone like Richard Branson, creating things, creating products more than anything, or a star, who is someone who's creating brand, so like an Oprah Winfrey or Martha Stewart creating brand, someone like a Jamie Oliver, right? He's a star profile, right? He's like really good at actually promoting through a brand, and who actually use other people's products to do that, right? So everyone's got themselves somewhere along here. Hands up who are the creators and stars in the room? Creators and stars, okay. Many creators and stars in the room because England is a creative nation, right? Now, every country has got a different element as well. Coming from Japan recently, Japan is so not creative. It is totally, like everyone's Lord and accumulator there, right? But that's why they're so good at being able to actually mechanize things and actually grow things at scale. And so knowing you need to have the right people in the right way. People who create some stars, they have a particular way that they create value, which is through something called innovation. It's just a natural thing, right? Which is like, I'm just going to start something new. They keep starting new things, they can't help it. They're always starting new things, right? Innovation is about a way of thinking, which is intuitive thinking. Intuitive thinking is about head in the clouds. So when you're a kid, right, when kids do this, right, and they find out, it's like, oh, I always get caught out at class for daydreaming. It's like, that's actually your strength, right? That's what you're good at doing. So this one here, intuitive thinking, head in the clouds, these people are really, really good at starting things, but they're actually terrible at finishing things. right? So, and you blame your team because of it. It's like, well, it's the team's fault. They can't read me, right? And so you're always moving faster than the team can catch up. And as a result of that, they eventually get left behind, and then things fall over again. Right? It's like watering the plant, being really good at starting to grow the plant, getting so excited you pull it up to see how the roots are doing. So many people are starting their business that way, right? Or you started your business and now you're running the business and you were great at starting it, but now you're running it and you're terrible at running it. And the worst thing is you think you're good at running it. It's like, no, I'm brilliant at running it. It's like I'm better than anyone else at running it. You're not, you're terrible. Stop doing it. There's going to be someone else who can actually do it better. Because while you can do it because you're thinking faster, it doesn't mean you're thinking better. And it doesn't mean you're spending as much time with the team you need to spend for them to really get it and for them to actually be empowered. And so often these people disempower your team. So be really, really aware that your strengths are also a weakness, and then as a result of that, you've got to get the right people. Richard Branson's got 300 companies, he don't run anything. He's got other people that run them for him. So we're going to see how this all links into not just what it is that we have strong at, but what our weaknesses are that we need to then actually build up in such a way we can surf a wave. Because always, when you're on a wave, it's going to be the weakness that sinks you. And if you haven't actually plugged that weakness, you can't go surf those waves in the first place. Now, there's other people here, like for example, there are those, let's come down to these two down here, right? We'll have the likes of the opposite of a trader, which is like a trader, or the opposite of a star, which is an accumulator. So someone like a George Soros is a trader. Someone like a Warren Buffett is an accumulator. These are people that don't actually need to create anything. Hands up who are our traders and accumulators in the room. Okay, you see not quite as many people, but they're here. They're going to be in high demand today, right? Because everyone needs these people, because they're the ones that build the roots. They're really good at service, they're really good at connecting. There's someone like a trader is not just someone like a George Soros who trades the markets. It's someone like a Mother Teresa or someone like Nelson Mandela who finds balance in things, right? So it's about someone who's actually always very sensory. So the opposite of intuitive thinking is sensory thinking. And the way that they create value is not through innovation, it's through timing. Timing means you just know when to buy, when to sell, or when to make the phone call, when to support or help out. They're always watching those things as well. I just said that England is a creative nation. Singapore is the opposite. Right? So I came from Singapore to come to, and Singapore is a trading nation. And Singapore has gone through these processes to try and get everyone to be creative because the government doesn't understand this stuff. They're like, holy cow, everyone's being creative. We're not being creative, we've got to be more creative. They'll have these big national programs that go out to say, be more creative, teach your children to be creative. And so I've got friends in Singapore, they'll go home to their kids, well-meaning, they'll go home, hey, Joe, come here. Yes, daddy. Go, be creative. Oh, okay. 5 minutes later comes back, Daddy, yes, what? How? I don't know, I'll just go do it. I have no idea how. Because, and that's because it was a trading nation. It wasn't actually developed as a trading nation. And if you go on something like Singapore Airlines, the service is awesome, right? Because everyone's just got this sensory nature to them, right? It's just what they naturally do. And if you don't have that in your business, you've got to bring it in because that service is what's going to keep your customers with you. There's some companies that are the opposite. Like on airlines, Singapore Airlines, the opposite might be, I won't mention British Airways, but I'll go to another creative nation, which is Australia, right? I was flying Australia on Qantas. And the same, I went straight from Singapore Airlines, where everyone's looking after you, everything's really nice. Onto Qantas, no one's even noticing you, right? You're asking for things that like you're gonna wait the whole flight to get anything. And what I've got to like look at, because my TV wasn't even working, was the little Qantas thing down below, which is like, looking at the flight manual thing, and I saw it was QANTAS. I'm like, what don't most queues have you after it? But obviously not here, so we stand for something. Oh, Qantas, oh, I see. Quit asking, no one's thinking about service, right? But that's okay, because like Australia is like a creative nation, just like England. It's like full of mad geniuses that come up with incredible ideas that then get stolen by the Japanese. Okay, so everyone here has got a different link of some sort. But this is only about top and bottom, right? At the end of the day, everyone's got some way of trading and some way of value. But there's also left and right, because there's also leverage. So we'll have the people on this side here. This will be, for example, the lords or the mechanics. Hands up the lords and mechanics in the room. Oh, okay, quite a few. There's actually more than that, but they're introverts, so they won't put their hands up. So this is about now action dynamic, right? This is thought dynamic, thinking dynamic. This is action dynamic. This is about entrepreneurship, which is about how do you turn thoughts into actions, or great entrepreneurship is how do you turn dreams into reality. These are these two links. And then from here, you've actually got now the action dynamic, which is introvert. These are all Jungian terms, but they actually come from the I Ching, because Carl Jung was the first to actually publish the I Ching, and he used these different Chinese elements to then create these terms. This is that was back in 1920 when he did that. This is introvert, this is extrovert, and you've got then the two opposites of leverage, where an introvert is very good at asking the question, how can this happen without me? How do I do a system so I don't have to be doing this? That's the multiplier, which is like, how do you make it simple and make many? So they'll be great at creating an online platform. They'll be really great. Like the system side, I was about 5-6 years ago when we first started these events, the wealthiest people in the world were all accumulators at that point, because we were going into the winter energy of the global economy. So there's a global wave, there's a industry wave, there's a country wave. Every one of these is waves on waves. And at that point, it was like Warren Buffett in America, it was Carlos Slim in South America, it was Li Ka-shing in China. They were the wealthiest people, all accumulators. And so some of the people in the audience were like, who's going to come next? I said, no question. The ones coming next are going to be the Lords and then the mechanics. Lords are the likes of Larry Pages, mechanics are the likes of Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg. And sure enough, like we've now got the wealthiest man in the world is Jeff Bezos. Mark Zuckerberg is now like third wealthiest in the world, right? That's all happened as a result of the wave now moving to the end of the winter cycle. We're about to start the next spring. And so by just understanding, this is not about forward prediction through some kind of, fortune telling. This is forward prediction through patterns. It's through knowing that seasons will always follow the same pattern. And it's about understanding where things are going. And your industry is currently going somewhere. And understanding where that's going. England's going somewhere. And these are all things that will come out of the questions that we'll be having in a moment as well. This allows us to actually say there's always a way to actually predict the wave and know which wave is the one I should be on. Multiply is then the opposite here of, so Lord is someone like a landlord, someone who's making money from the cash flow, but really good at numbers, really good at systems, not so great at going out speaking to people, don't have to do that, they have the right team to do that. Mechanics are really great at creating, but creating systems as opposed to products or as opposed to branding. And then here, we would then have the likes of our supporters who are really great at building teams, and then also our deal makers who are great at being able to get out there and do the deal because they're great with people and timing. Hands up our supporters and deal makers in the room. Many of them here, right? So do look out for them. If you have any close to you, keep close to them because they're going to meet everyone here today and tomorrow. They're going to meet everyone. But here's the challenge for someone here who's extrovert. They'll go out meeting people. Every day they'll be meeting people. Even if they're not an event like this, they'll still go meet people. They'll go for the whole week meeting people. They'll go to the end of the week after meeting all these people. They'll still have no idea, why did I meet all those people? I just don't think for it. So knowing that all this links also to a particular energy which is linked to the elements, right? So these are the elements that you find in the Chinese cycle. It starts with this one at the top, which is, we know it as spring energy, right? It's like the season. But the Chinese call this wood. Wood is growth, right? This is to grow. And it's always about the question what, which is why they're so good. Everyone asks questions, but everyone asks different questions naturally. So what should I do? What's a new idea? They'll always have their what, right? They won't go and consult other people. They'll just figure it out for themselves. Whereas the people here, this is summer energy, they'll always be fire energy, right? You need wood to turn into fire. You need what to figure out the who. This is all about the who energy. So someone like Steve Ballmer, he's become a billionaire by having enough wood from Bill Gates to turn into fire, and as a result of that, he's now able to magnify that wood. So this one here, multiply, the opposite is magnify, which is not how do I do this without me, it's how do I only do this with me. How does this become my team, my brand, my deal, so that people will always come to me for that, right? It's not how do I make one thing simple and make many, it's how do I make one thing complex and keep it as one, right? It's a very, very different way of leveraging. But by doing this, you can charge more per product and have less sales and actually make more money. Whereas over here, you're actually charging less and you're actually making more sales. So understanding that your strategy has everything to do with what you naturally do well and what's right for your business. This summer then goes to autumn. So this is autumn down here, where it now settles down. This is earth, ear to the ground. So this is earth. This is head in the clouds, ear to the ground. And then from here, earth, which is about the when question, which is why they're so good at timing. We then get to the final one, which is winter. This one here, which is the how question. This is the metal. This is the alchemical. This is the alchemical cycle, right? Like how do you create gold? You create it not by getting it from thin air, by turning from wood to fire, fire to earth, earth to metal. And you mine the earth from metal. This is the how, and the how becomes a whole lot easier. Most of us start by saying how. How do I do something? I don't know, then you don't do it. As opposed to, well, who do I actually need to do that? Oh, this person. That person already knows how. And then, of course, the whole cycle becomes much, much, much easier. So there's always a way to unlock your business, whether you're just starting up, whether you've got a $100 million business, there's always a way to take it to the next level and add that extra zero and decode it. And this whole element is knowing that there's now a roadmap to entrepreneurship that 10 years ago really didn't exist because there weren't that many entrepreneurs. There's so many more now today, and it's time we're all using a roadmap that actually works. This one works, and there may be others that you use that work too, but you have to be using those maps, or else we're all going to be going wherever we're going, and we're still going to be lost. So, with that in mind, I want you to take just a moment, first of all, with the person next to you, and just share what's one distinction with Wealth Dynamics after doing the test yourself that you got from it, or even what I just shared here, and tell the person what profile you are, and vice versa, for that person to share with you as well. Take a moment and have a conversation.
As people are speaking, just to take a moment and share something, I will appreciate Koi Kirui Kirumba for coming on, Samuel Nyando for coming in, and Eva Mbiru, thank you so much for coming in. Noah Kipogei, thank you for coming in, and of course, King of Social Media, Mr. Olayomi Koiki, great to see you watching. Nina Soko, thank you for coming in. Michael Tola, it's good to see you. If I've missed anybody here today, please forgive me. I'm in quite in the middle of a space and my hands are getting tired, so I'm moving a lot, but just to try and capture this, you'll have a beautiful coverage from themselves, but as you know, I love to reach my audience as well, so please, Saturday morning, it's just coming. I thought this lady was Her Royal Majesty Moradi. She does look so much like you, so I thought that was you. It's 10:47 here in London, so back in London now, and I just made it to the summit.
That helps you out, but at this point, we're going to be organizing everyone into groups where you're going to have a chance to meet others, and at the same time, be figuring out what would be the biggest question that we'd have right now that we want to ask. We're going to be pulling questions from different groups as we go through the rest of today as well. So just as a reminder of the different profiles, here is one big graphic. This is the legacy graphic. It was the one that we had for several years, where you can see we had Bill Gates there as creator, Winfrey Star, we had Steve Ballmer supporter. We had to get rid of this one because people started complaining, or at least the deal makers started complaining. So we ended up saying, sure, we'll create a new one, right? So we now have a new one, which actually has got new faces. It's actually politically correct as well. We have half women, half men, given that we now have more women entrepreneurs in the world than men entrepreneurs. So we have Richard Branson there, yeah, root for that. We have Beyonce there as a star, we have Ben Whitman as a supporter, Masayoshi Son from Japan, a dealmaker. That is Melinda Gates as trader. We have Warren Buffett as accumulator, as Christine Lagarde as board, and we have obviously our Mark Zuckerberg as mechanic. So these are the current cycle methods where we're at. We are going to take everyone in the room and reorganize the rooms. This is not you trying to get everyone into one big circle. It's you getting into an area where your profile is and get yourself into really kind of like circles of 8. When I say circles, it means you can physically change the chairs, move the chairs around, have a conversation. Why 8? Because 8 happens to be a pretty good number for everyone to have a conversation and still hear each other, because it's going to get very noisy in here. And so if you try and get everyone all squished around where you can all see each other, it's not going to be possible. We'll have multiple little circles there. But we're going to actually, first of all, organize the room. I'll tell you where you're going to go. So first of all, we're going to have me up here, right? So this is the stage, but I'm going to be coming down to you guys down here. In a moment, we're going to then have our creators. Hands up the creators in the room. Hands up creators. So we have a lot of creators in the room, right? So we're going to have all the creators, which are going to be in this area here, right? Those are going to be the creators. It's a pretty big area, right? So Danny's going to be here with the silent creators. Don't go to Danny. You're going to go and actually organize yourself into your seats in a moment as you do this. But don't do anything until I finish my instructions, because there's some other things I need to share before you start moving as well. Hands up the stars in the room. Hands up the stars. We do have a lot of stars as well, right? So we're going to actually take the stars. They're going to be kind of like in this area here in a moment. So that's going to be the stars, right? Those are the stars. And hands up the supporters. Supporters, there's also a lot of supporters as well, right? So supporters actually, while you think they'll be this side, we're kind of going to put them here because there are so many. They're going to be like behind the creators around there. And then hands up those people who are our deal makers here. Deal makers? Right, so we have some, but not as many. That's probably going to be like 2 groups. So we're going to have the deal makers who are going to be around here. Hands up the traders. And again, smaller number of traders. The traders are going to be around here. They're going to be in the same area on that side, but they might even be just 1 or just 2 circles there. Hands up our accumulators. accumulators. Okay, so again, small number of accumulators. So you're going to be in the corner over there. Those are going to be the accumulators. Hands up, our lords, more lords, and then hands up mechanics, and more mechanics, right? So the lords are going to be here. The mechanics are going to be here. You get a rough idea of where you're going to be. And if you're not sure, just set yourself up in whichever area feels most comfortable to you right now. Like I said, you're going to get yourself into groups of 8. When you get in the groups of 8, introduce yourself to each other. You can get started straight away once you got your 8. Sit down, don't be standing, get your seat, sit down, and then just have a chat about, within the group, well, what do you know about this profile? What's worked well for you? And if you had a question, what would be your biggest question? Not everyone will have a question. You might have 3 or 4 people per question, but by going through that and going through that process, you're going to figure out what the best question is that you might want to ask me. We're going to be sharing those as well. You need to take your things with you because they may not be there when you get back, and you do not need to take your chair because there's already one there. Right, so everyone, you've got a couple of minutes.
I'm gonna say have a beautiful day. For now, I'm going to go to my group because we did a passion test in the online, and I want to follow this. So I'll speak to you soon. Goodbye, everyone. Join me in a few, maybe in the next half an hour, 1 hour. I'll come back with you. Let me go to my group. Speak soon. This is really, really lovely. One of my best sessions every weekend. I love this.
Disappointed.
Yeah. It's over 1,000 people in this room. So yes, I need to learn so I can support so many of you as well. Speak soon. It really renews my energy. And until later, just allow me to find my group. Bye-bye for now. Thank you for part 1 of those who are joining in. I'm looking for my group. Let me leave you together. Okay. Yeah, that's okay. You're going to mechanics, yeah? I'm going to, according to my, what I've ticked, I'm a star. So let me go and find other stars on this. In a team, we need all this. This is what really it's all about. We need creators, we need stars, we need supporters, we need deal makers, we need traders, we need accumulators, we need lords, and we need mechanics, and we need creators. So I'm trying to go and see where my weaknesses are. And so I will be letting you know so that I can feel that hole where my weaknesses are. Speak later. I better do that now. Juliet Masapila.